Live from the KMOV Broadcast Center in downtown St. Louis, this is News 4 Mayoral Town Hall.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to KMOV's virtual Town Hall series. In 2 weeks, voters in the city of St. Louis will head to the polls to elect a new mayor. And after a new type of primary last month called approval voting, for the first time in history, 2 women are going head-to-head in the mayoral election. City Treasurer Tashara Jones facing off against Alderwoman Cara Spencer. Jones got the most votes in the primary at 56%. Spencer picked up 46% of the vote, and we're going to speak with Jones on Thursday night. But right now, I am joined by Alderwoman Cara Spencer. Cara, thanks for joining us.
Of course, thanks for having me.
How are things going over the last couple weeks since the last time we talked?
Oh, things are going great. The energy is high. The engagement is off the charts, and people are really excited to tune in to the mayor's race. And
for voters that don't know who Cara Spencer is, what do you want people to know about you?
Well, you know, I'm not your typical candidate for mayor in that I don't come from a political family. I'm not one of the dynasties here in St. Louis. You know, I'm just a single mom. I'm the first member of my family to get a college degree. And I ran for office 5 years ago, really having looked around and saw an enormous amount of challenges in the district I currently represent. Needles on the ground, you know, bullet casings, vacant buildings on every block. And I decided that we needed to turn the 20th Ward in a new direction. So I ran for office in 2015 in a 3-way race that the pundits said looked impossible, and I won. I got right to work turning the neighborhoods I currently represent from decades of decline into a pattern of real growth. And I want to take that citywide by serving as our city's next mayor. Let's
first talk about crime. You've said it. Other candidates have said it. Crime is the biggest issue facing the city of St. Louis. You've talked about a 10-step plan, including something that's called focused deterrent strategies, targeting high-rate offenders and high-rate offenders groups. So explain that a little bit more. And when I say groups, do you think St. Louis City has a gang problem?
Well, let's start by talking about crime in a general sense. The next administration has got to focus laser sharp on addressing crime. It is the #1 issue, it's the #2 issue, it's the #3 issue. If we don't effectively address violent crime in the city of St. Louis, nothing else really matters. We've had 8 children shot and killed in the city of St. Louis just since January alone. And we've had we're set to break last year's record here in homicide. So when I decided to run for mayor, I got serious about how other cities are effectively addressing violence. I went to those cities, talked to the folks who've been successful at bringing programs and implementing them in other cities. And that's how I developed the 10-step crime plan that you referenced there. One of the key pieces of that is the focused deterrence model that you just mentioned. That's a program that's been successful in Boston, Oakland, cities that look a lot like St. Louis and have some of the same challenges by focusing on those small number of individuals who are at risk at being involved in violence.
I know a lot of our viewers watching this might have some crime questions as well. And by the way, with this virtual format, if you have a question for Alderwoman Cara Spencer, put it in the comments on the Facebook Live and we'll be sure to get those to you. But more on this crime plan. Officers on the street, Chief Hayden, Mayor Cruson right now has talked numerous times about 150 officers short in the St. Louis City Police Department. Do we need more officers to respond to crimes and to fight crime here in the city of St. Louis? Is that a priority for you, is getting more officers in the department?
Well, what the first priority is going to be is taking the resources that we do have and putting them to the highest best use. Civic Progress, the Regional Business Council, recently commissioned a study of our policing department through an organization called Teneo. We had some very top-notch individuals come to the city of St. Louis, including Bill Bratton and former Chief Chuck Ramsey, to take a look at our policing model here in St. Louis. And what really came out of that is an enormous amount of inefficiency within the police department as it stands right now. So the first step is going to be to reorganize the policing department in a way that is going to best utilize those resources that we do have. We do know that hiring more officers, even if we prioritize doing that, it's going to be a long-term strategy, because with turnover and the policing academy that we have, it would take a number of years to even get to that 150 number that you just referenced. But the point is, we have a lot of work that we can do with the policing resources that we do have now if we just reorient follow the recommendations of the study that we have available to us as of January of this year, put that to work right away.
Are you saying there's too many officers or police people in uniform that are working behind the desk and aren't out on the streets right now?
That's part of the issue. There's a real structural issue as well as far as the organization of the police department in general. There's a lot of redundancies that can be eliminated through a reorganization of the police department.
Do you support defunding the police at all?
Oh, absolutely not. Look, we have a lot of work to rebuild the trust between our community and our police department. That's very, very clear. And in fact, it's one of the most important things that we can do to improve public safety. When the witnesses and victims of violent crime don't trust our law enforcement community to share the vital information they need to solve those crimes, we can't move forward. We have to rebuild trust. But we can't do that by failing to respond to violence. We need a police department that is fully equipped so that when we are soliciting law enforcement because of violence, shootings, homicides, criminal activity, that they're prepared and equipped to respond.
Other candidates, as I said, yourself, even your opponent, Tashara Jones, talking about crime being the biggest issue. Mayors in the past, Mayor Cruzen, they come into office and they say that we need to do something about the crime problem. Yet we've seen the crime trend in St. Louis continue to grow, violent crime especially, with our murder rate even going beyond what it was last year. So with that all being said, what makes you different? What do you think has been the biggest shortfall of us fighting crime in the city of St. Louis?
I think the biggest shortfall is really focusing laser sharp on it and taking from what other cities have been successfully implementing. The city of St. Louis has stuck out like a sore thumb nationally for failing to address violence. We have continued on the same path, doing the same thing year after year without really taking a look at those programs, those effective programs in other cities. And I'm going to be serious about doing that. We're going to recruit talent from other cities to come and help us implement those strategies, programs that have been effective there. They can work here in the city of St. Louis. And we know that. We even implemented a pilot program of focused deterrence here in St. Louis in 2012, and it was very effective. We need to take seriously the recommendations of the Teneo report, put them in action, and partner with our law enforcement community, our business community, to make sure that they're successful. And
correct me if I'm wrong, but part of that strategy is also partnering with the Circuit Attorney's Office, the prosecutor in the city of St. Louis, correct?
That's right. And I am committed to working with Circuit Attorney Kim Gardner, absolutely. Look, if we can't get justice in the courts, we can't expect anything other than more justice in the streets. And this is hurting our communities. It's hurting our families, their victims of violence, most especially. So we do have to reorient and make sure that we have a victims first model and providing that justice through the path of the courts.
What is your relationship right now with Kim Gardner?
Circuit Attorney Kim Gardner. I am fully committed to working with her. We have worked together on budgetary issues. I serve on the Ways and Means Committee of the Board of Aldermen. We've gone through her budget. I understand where some of the needs in her office are, some of the additional needs, and I'm prepared and ready to work with her to make sure that we can address those needs that her office has so that she can be, equipped to do the best job that she can in that elected position.
In that office, do you think enough is being done to, lock up violent offenders especially and keep them, locked up so that they can't commit future crimes?
Well, I mean, again, one of the issues, the biggest issues that we're having here is just making sure that we are, when violence is taking place, that we're holding those folks responsible for that violence responsible. And we're seeing that the homicide clearance rate is exceptionally low. And there's a lot of factors that play into it. One of which is that, like I mentioned earlier, witnesses and victims of violent crime are not sharing the vital information that our law enforcement agencies need to build the case to go before the courts to get folks who are responsible for those actions held responsible. So my job as mayor will be to repair the relationship between our communities and our police department. And, the citizens of St. Louis elected the prosecutor to do her job, and I stand ready to support her to do her job the best that she can.
You mentioned off the top the reasons you got into this race and even got into your current role as Alderwoman is you saw a lot of the issues in your own ward, the 20th ward in South City. We said you finished second in the primary, and in the primary it was actually Tashara Jones that got the most votes in your own ward, in the 20th ward. What message does that send, and is that an issue with some of the constituents that you represent?
Well, no, I mean, you're talking about 20 votes, difference there in that election result. But look, I'm coming out of a full-on smear campaign all last summer following the privatization of the airport, a fully funded effort to have me recalled from office from the very special interests that were trying to privatize our airports. Those special interests, by the way, which are funding the campaign of my opponent right now. Coming out of that, it's no surprise that, my voters having to bear that for a good part of the summer here, I have to overcome that. I don't think that really shares the message. I won re-election last year with 70% of the vote, and I'm very proud of that. And no, I don't think that really is going to play into this election cycle. Look, my name ID, I started out this year with just single digits of folks who knew about Cara Spencer. And coming out of this election, second place is a real testament to the voters of the city of St. Louis calling for change. And that momentum has grown every day since the primary.
We're starting to get a couple questions on Facebook, so I want to read this. This is from Kayla. What is your plan to address the segregation problem in St. Louis?
That's a great question. We are perhaps the most racially segregated city in the nation. And there's a real difference in lived experience north of Del Mar. I bought my first house north of Del Mar, and I know firsthand the difference that the living north of Del Mar really is. We have a long history of segregating our housing, going back, to the beginning of St. Louis city government. The city of St. Louis is the real birthplace of housing covenants, and really creating a segregated lived experience. And it is the role and the responsibility of the city of St. Louis to undo that. So if elected mayor, we talked a lot about our challenges here tonight, but we have an enormous opportunity ahead of us with this federal aid package of $500 million. And one of the things I'm going to do with that is inject a long-term strategy for stabilizing housing, focusing on the neighborhoods north of Del Mar, spending the lion's share of those funds to stabilize housing and make sure that we have a path to home ownership, to our residents, and a real clear funding for our low to moderate income homeowners to stay in their homes, and making sure that we can stabilize neighborhoods that have seen an enormous amount of disinvestment over the last few decades.
Since you just mentioned the $500 million of federal stimulus money that will be coming to St. Louis, we do have a graphic, I believe. Mayor Cruzen last week announced her breakdown of where a lot of this funds would go, and we can see it: $175 million to lost revenue, $80 million to infrastructure, $78 million to public safety, $61 million to housing issues, some of the issues that you just mentioned. When you look at that breakdown, and if you are elected mayor, it would be your money to kind of decide what to do with it, because Mayor Cruzen will no longer be the mayor when this money does come in. And when you look at that breakdown, do you agree with the breakdown, and will there be more money than just that 61 on housing issues, since you did just talk about that?
Well, look, there is a significant amount of lost revenue that we have to take into account. The infrastructure piece is critical. We have such deficit in what we've invested in our streets, our roads, our bridges, and we have to make some investments there. But I think there's some other funding sources we could take a look at for some of those. Housing stabilization has got to be key. When you look at the formula that really determined how much money the city of St. Louis is going to get, that federal formula, it included housing, the decay in our housing stock, our economic stagnation, and poverty. And those are the three areas that drove the enormity of the funding package, and those are the areas that we should be focusing on addressing with that funding package.
She did say $78 million for public safety. So going back to the safety of the residents of the city of St. Louis, when you look at that public safety element of it, What do you think that money, if it's millions of dollars, should be used when it comes to public safety?
Well, look, I'm going to have to take a look at what the current mayor is proposing with that $78 million. What I'd like to see, is a long-term strategy for addressing some of the root causes of crime, and that looks like poverty and some of the issues related to the question that Kayla brought up, which is racial segregation, and starting to take a look at investing in a long-term strategy for breaking some of those deficits down, which are really causing us to have an inability to have the organic growth that a city like St. Louis, with the incredible amount of amenities that we do have, the cultural assets, should be experiencing. But we know that crime and racial segregation are really inhibiting us from experiencing that organic growth.
People maybe outside of the city of St. Louis County, Jefferson County, I mean, you name it around the metro, they'll look at St. Louis City and, its crime is the big thing that needs to be addressed. And you agree it's a big issue, but when you hear from your constituents, what are they talking about? What are some of the other big things that just daily lives, they're going on in their daily lives that need to be addressed that you can help out as you think as mayor?
Sure. I mean, people want to see their garbage picked up, their streets paved, their alleys cleaned. We have an enormous issue in the city of St. Louis with just keeping our streets clean, alleys clean, illegal dumping. These are the things that really impact people's everyday lived experience in St. Louis. So, making sure that the delivery of basic city services, those, picking up the trash, et cetera, are distributed equally, distributed equitably, needs to be a priority of the next administration. We know the lived experience is very, very different in St. Louis, and it's the job of the mayor. It would be my job to break that down and hold accountable, making sure through accountability measures that we are improving that basic delivery of city services.
Another question coming in here on Facebook, so I'll read this for the first time here. This is from Sarah. Wants to know, how would your problem landlord unit plan to hold slumlords accountable?
Yes, this is so important. This really plays into improving public safety outside of a traditional policing model. We know that we have a lot of folks who park their financial assets in the city of St. Louis and let the buildings decay. It is important that we're holding property owners accountable. I started this work at the Board of Aldermen by holding Paul McKee accountable for the building code violations that he had been exempt for over a decade. Going a step further and increasing the fines for boarding up vacant buildings when police escorts are required, so that we can hold property owners accountable for letting their properties decay in our communities. But we need to go beyond that and make sure that the housing that our landlords are providing is healthy and safe by providing for regular inspections, so that the tenants don't have to be responsible for conjuring that up and maybe experiencing an eviction or some retaliatory action from their landlord. We know that we have a handful, I know in the 20th Ward, a handful of bad actors who really degrade the overall lived experience in our communities by failing to be good stewards of the properties that they own.
What can voters and people in the city of St. Louis under a Cara Spencer administration expect in the first few months of your administration if you were elected mayor?
Well, right off the bat, first 100 days, we are going to have to get serious about making sure that the COVID vaccine is distributed as equitably as possible, taking the measurements that we can to make sure that we're getting it into the arms of the most vulnerable. We're going to have to get the budget under wraps right off the bat, understand that $170 million that the current mayor has projected, and use those COVID dollars immediately to get our economy up and running. Make sure people are stabilized in their housing, whether it's owned or rented, making sure that those bills are paid and we're not seeing a mass wave of people displaced, and addressing some of the issues of our most vulnerable. Following that, we're going to put that public safety plan into place day one. We're going to work with the Teneo report and make sure, and my 10-step crime plan, to bring those programs to St. Louis right off the bat. And so those are the most serious things, most pressing pressing issues that we're going to be working on starting on April 21.
Since you mentioned the budget, one of the possibilities out there is Prop E, which is also on the April 6th ballot. And that's it's the city's earnings tax, that 1% earnings tax that the city relies so heavily on. About a third of the city's budget is accounted for that. If that is voted down, what kind of detriment do you believe that would be done to the city, and how would you address that?
Well, I am pleasantly surprised that there doesn't seem to be a concerted effort to defeat the earnings tax. That's a good thing, and I am hopeful that the voters of the city of St. Louis take this very seriously and vote yes for Prop E. But make no mistake, if Prop E fails, it would be devastating to our budget and to our economy. And so, if that were to happen, that we would need all hands on deck to figure out what is next for the city of St. Louis. I'm not prepared to really talk about that at this point because it would be so truly devastating to the city's underlying ability to just basically function. Before COVID hit, we were struggling, with a city that has the high rate of poverty that St. Louis has. 30% poverty, 3 times the national average, 3 times the regional average. And so it is important that we do not disrupt that at this time and instead position the city for growing the underlying economy so that so it wouldn't have such a devastating impact.
Getting another question here. This is from Bob. Would like to know your thoughts on the relationship with St. Louis County and any possible merger between the county and the city?
Sure. I have lived everywhere just about. I've grown up, spent my whole life in St. Louis, and of course I've lived in St. Louis City, St. Louis County, and various municipalities. But it is important, it is crucial that the city and the county, the region, collaborate more moving forward. If we don't have a regional strategy for growth, we're going to continue to stagnate as we have my entire lifetime. St. Louis region is roughly the same size as it was population-wise the day I was born 40 years ago. And this has resulted in a gentle slide westward of our population and a hollowing out of our city core. And this is devastating to the region as a whole. St. Louis, our region, has performed at an abysmal rate, a quarter of the national average over the last 10 years of economic expansion. We're being outperformed by Nashville, Kansas City, but we're being outperformed by our neighbors in Missouri, including Columbia, Springfield. Until we develop a regional approach to growing St. Louis, we can't expect to come out of that slump. So I'm hopeful about moving that conversation forward because it is the leadership in St. Louis County that has been driving that conversation. I joined the St. Louis Municipal League a few years ago. I sit on the executive board out there. I'm the first member of the executive board from the city of St. Louis in 100 years. And that experience out there has afforded me to build relationships. And I've watched those municipal mayors lead the charge on the conversation of the Board of Freeholders. And it's their efforts that I think really showcase a paradigm shift in this conversation and makes me very hopeful for actually getting movement on some kind of reorganization and a better regional approach to how we provide basic services to our regional residents.
One of the impacts also of COVID-19 has been office space, and especially in the downtown St. Louis area. We know that a lot of people are working from home. They're not having to have office spaces anymore. Is that going to be hurting the city of St. Louis? And what are you hearing as far as companies not possibly coming back and just what that overall impact is going to be here in the downtown area?
Well, that is a real concern, and I do share concerns about that. Having a successful, we can't have a successful St. Louis without a successful city, and we can't have a successful city without a successful downtown. So making sure that our downtown is successful has got to be important to the next mayor. It is important to me, and recognizing that shift could be taking place is something we need to keep our eye out very closely. But one of the things that the administration can and should be doing to protect our downtown is investing in it and making sure that we are addressing the ongoing issues down there, including the increased criminal activity, the we've heard about the cruising and the shots fired and that sort of thing. We need to take that very seriously and work with the downtown community to nip it in the bud, to address it immediately. And by that I mean looking at some of the problem properties that are participating in that, getting excise under control, holding those with liquor license accountable for some of the late night activity going on down there, and making sure that we're moving our downtown in a positive way.
How do you help change the perception that St. Louis sometimes gets on a regional and national scale? I mean, we're kind of known as this top in the crime when it comes to those FBI lists and all that. So how do you change that perception when it comes to maybe attracting new businesses also to downtown?
Yeah, we've got to tell our story on the national side of things and tell our story here regionally. We are a phenomenal city. We have so much going on downtown and throughout our neighborhoods. And we need a mayor who's going to champion that and be a cheerleader for St. Louis again, telling the positive stories where we can. When I took over the 20th Ward, a lot of what you saw in the news about our neighborhoods was negative, about the crime, etc. And it took a proactive approach, even on the aldermanic neighborhood level, to sort of reorient some of the local stories about my community, the community I represent, and taking that approach nationally, regionally, on the city as a whole is what we need to do. We are a phenomenal city. It's not hard to convince people who have been here how great St. Louis is, but we need to bring them here, and we need to give them a microphone, and we need to make sure that that positive story is told.
Last week, some pretty big news. Public Safety Director Jimmy Edwards announced that he is going to be stepping down at the end of the month. Does the city of St. Louis need to fill that position? Do we need a public safety director?
We do. We need somebody at the helm and sort of organizing public safety in a broad sense. One of the things coming out of the Teneo report is that we don't have a strategy for dealing with violence. And a strategy for dealing with violence goes beyond a police department. A real strategy for violence includes the building division, for example, neighborhood stabilization, the other departments that are involved in really providing a base level of public safety in our community. Beyond policing, policing needs to be included in that, and our police department is a very important, the law enforcement community is a very important piece of that, but public safety goes well beyond just policing. And so that person, that role, needs to be at the helm of sort of organizing all that.
Yeah, I know Mayor Cruson works hand in hand with Jimmy Edwards. Since he'll be gone, and let's say that you are elected mayor, I mean, is there anybody that comes to mind? I know it just happened last week, but that you would want to see in that position?
Well, this is something that I've been thinking about, my team has been thinking about for some time, recognizing that I think, while I have a great deal of respect for Judge Edwards, I volunteered at the Juvenile Justice Center for almost a decade while he was the judge there, and came to have a tremendous amount of respect for his service as a judge here in the city of St. Louis. But recognizing that I think it is time for a change in public safety here in our city. Been thinking about that role. I'm not prepared to talk about specific people, but we need somebody who understands that public safety does go beyond our police department, but needs to include our law enforcement community in the solution.
As we're talking about public safety, the police chief, John Hayden, relationship with him, how is that? And you worked hand in hand through your ward with helping to fight crime in the 20th?
Absolutely. I have worked through the 3rd District captains significantly through my service, but certainly worked directly with the chief. This is now the 3rd chief I've worked with over the police department. And I have to say, I'm a fellow mathematician. Both Chief Hayden and I studied mathematics. We approach things from an analytical perspective, and I do think he has a good amount of support from within the law enforcement community. Particularly the officers of color. I've been speaking with the Ethical Society of Police and others. I'm going to weigh into that. I'm not prepared to speak on that, but I do think that he has done a significant amount to root out some of the issues within the police department, and I think that's worthy of noting at this point.
And finally, your final sales pitch to the voters. Why should they vote for Cara Spencer on April 6th?
Look, St. Louis We need a leader who recognizes that the city of St. Louis is in both crisis, but has an enormous opportunity. And we need a leader who can lead us, not with divisiveness, but with unity, with energy, and with hope for our future. I have served the city of St. Louis as an alderman for 5 years now, and have taken on the special interests that have held us back from moving our city forward. And if elected your mayor on April 6th, I will change course for St. Louis and move us in a positive direction, as I have in the 20th Ward, with transparency and good government at the heart of my actions.
Cara, really appreciate your time. All right, and remember, you can catch all of our virtual town halls, and we're going to talk with Tashara Jones at 7 p.m. this upcoming Thursday. You can watch all those on KMOV.com and the KMOV News app and the KMOV Facebook page. And if you happen to miss a portion of this virtual hall tonight, you can find it again on the KMOV News app and KMOV.com. Cara Spencer, thank you again, and we'll see you next Thursday.
Great. Thanks so much.